I was holding my son's hand when I realized how easy it was for him to lie to me. The hospital room was dim, washed in that soft blue light they use at night, like they're trying to convince you nothing bad can happen after visiting hours. Machines hummed. A monitor kept time with a rhythm that wasn't quite human. My son, Aaron, lay there with his eyes half closed, his face pale, his voice weak in all the right places. "Dad," he said, barely above a whisper. "I don't think I'll ever walk again." I nodded, because that's what fathers do when their children are hurting. We nod. We absorb it. We don't let our faces betray the panic clawing up our throats. I squeezed his hand and told him we'd get through it together, even though the word together felt heavier than it ever had before. I'm 70 years old, widower, retired municipal inspector, a man who spent 4 decades measuring foundations, checking load limits, making sure things didn't collapse because someone cut corners. I believed in evidence, in structure, in truth. That night, I believed my son. Then a nurse changed everything. She was finishing her rounds when she paused beside my chair. Mid-40s, tired eyes, steady movements. The kind of woman who's seen too much to dramatize anything. As she adjusted the 4, her fingers brushed my wrist. Something folded into my palm. No eye contact. No explanation. She walked out. I waited until the door closed before unfolding the paper. For words, written carefully, like each one mattered. "He's walking at night. Check the cameras." My chest tightened. I looked back at Aaron. His breathing was slow, controlled, almost practiced. The room felt colder than it had a moment earlier. What kind of father doubts his own son? I told myself it was nothing. Stress, grief, exhaustion playing tricks on an old man's mind. But the note stayed warm in my hand long after I shoved it into my jacket pocket. If stories like this resonate with you, I'll say this quietly. Consider subscribing, and if you feel comfortable, tell me where you're listening from. Some truths are easier to carry when someone else is there to hear them. By morning, I hadn't slept. There were small things I couldn't unsee once the seed was planted. Aaron's phone always faced down. The way his pain came and went depending on who was in the room. How his wife, Melissa, talked more about insurance forms and my house than about his recovery. When he told me I should go home and rest, I believed him. I kissed his forehead, promised I'd be back soon. I didn't know that was a lie too, just not mine. I didn't go home. I sat in my car across the street from the hospital, rain streaking the windshield, my laptop balanced on my knees. When the security feed loaded, my finger hovered over the timestamp the nurse had written on the back of the note. 1:40 a.m. I could still close it, still protect the version of my son I thought I knew. Instead, I pressed play. And in that moment, everything I believed about the accident and about my own child began to collapse. The footage didn't stutter. It didn't blur. There was no dramatic music, no grainy mystery that left room for interpretation. Just a quiet hospital room, filmed from above, indifferent and precise. I watched myself stand from the chair beside Aaron's bed, shoulders rounded, the posture of a man who believed his son was broken. I paused at the door, like I always did, looking back once more, then stepped out. The door closed. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Aaron's eyes opened. Not slow, not foggy, alert, focused. He turned his head, listening. The room was silent except for the monitor. Then he pushed himself upright. No wince, no hesitation. He swung both legs over the side of the bed and stood. Just stood there. My hands went numb. I remember thinking he forgot to limp. Aaron reached under his pillow and pulled out his phone. Scrolled. Smiled. At 1:47 a.m., the door opened again. Melissa stepped inside carrying a paper bag. Fast food. I recognized the logo instantly. They laughed. Real laughter, the kind that comes from relief, not pain. She handed him the bag. He ate like a healthy man. Big bites. Fries. Soda. No trembling hands. No careful movements. At 1:52, he leaned back against the bed and stretched. Stretched. She kissed his forehead, gathered the trash, and left. Aaron slid the phone back under the pillow, lay down, pulled the blanket up, and closed his eyes. By 1:56, he looked exactly as he had before. Helpless. Convincing. The screen went black. I stared at my reflection in it. I looked older than I felt. Or maybe I just finally looked my age. The worst part wasn't what I saw. It was remembering his voice from earlier that night. "Dad, I'm scared." How real it had sounded. How easily he'd reached for the one thing he knew I couldn't refuse, my protection. My phone buzzed. A text. Then a call. "Harold," said Daniel Mercer. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Former colleague. Private investigator now. A man who never wasted words. I kept digging. I didn't speak. "Your son is drowning in debt. Bad property deal. Short-term loans stacking up. There was a payment made 10 days before the accident. $15,000. To an orthopedic specialist." My stomach dropped. "The original MRI showed no spinal damage," Daniel continued. "The report on file was altered, and there's already a buyer lined up for your house. Private sale. Quick close. My house. The one my wife and I built with blistered hands and weakened over time. The place Aaron learned to ride a bike. The place Melissa kept calling an asset." I ended the call without saying goodbye. I drove home in silence. No radio. No traffic felt real. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. Porch light glowing softly, just like Martha liked it. But I knew something fundamental had shifted. Inside, the smell of old books and lemon polish wrapped around me. Comforting. Familiar. I sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee that had gone cold, because warmth felt dishonest. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. I froze accounts. Changed passwords. Made lists. Names. Dates. Documents. Facts don't raise their voices, but they always finish the argument. When Melissa called later, her tone gentle, rehearsed, I told her I'd be back at the hospital tomorrow. That part was true. What I didn't tell her was that I was done being fooled. I wasn't angry yet. I was clear. And clarity, I would learn, is far more dangerous than anger ever is. The next morning, I dressed the same way I always did when I wanted to disappear. Neutral colors. Soft cardigan. The uniform of a harmless old man. I even practiced the expression in the mirror, the worried father, worn thin by sleepless nights and bad news. At the hospital, nothing had changed. Same disinfectant smell. Same beeping monitors. Same illusion of fragility. Aaron smiled when he saw me. "Weak, grateful. Dad," he said, voice trembling just enough. "I thought maybe you wouldn't come back." I sat beside him and took his hand. It was warm. Strong. That detail landed harder than it should have. "I needed a little rest," I said. True, in a way that surprised me. "How's the pain today?" He exhaled, slow and careful. "Pretty bad. The nights are worse." Melissa hovered near the window, arms folded, watching my face more than her husband's. She was always watching now. Measuring. Calculating. They let the morning pass before bringing up money. That wasn't an accident. Aaron talked about physical therapy, about fear, about not wanting to be a burden. Melissa filled in the gaps, insurance delays, surgical timelines, costs that kept inflating without explanation. Then came the pause, the one I recognized now. "Dad," Aaron said quietly, squeezing my hand. "I don't want to ask this. I hate that it even crossed my mind." I waited. There's someone interested in buying your house," Melissa added gently, stepping closer. "A fair offer. Quick close. It would solve everything." Fair. The word hit me wrong, like a measurement taken with a crooked ruler. "That house is just wooden walls," she continued. "But this is Aaron's future." I nodded slowly. Said nothing. Silence makes people nervous. They rush to fill it. "I don't want to live my life knowing I ruined you," Aaron whispered. I couldn't stand that. Something inside me settled then. Not pain. Not rage. Understanding. "I need time," I said. "This isn't a small decision." They exchanged a glance, brief, controlled. Relief flickered across Melissa's face before she smoothed it away. That night, I sat alone in the living room with the lights off, listening to the old hallway clock tick. Martha had loved that clock, said it sounded like the house breathing. I called Daniel again. "I'm ready," I said. "For what?" he asked. "To let the truth finish what it started." Over the next few days, I did nothing dramatic. I visited Aaron, asked the same questions, listened more than I spoke. At home, I worked quietly, printed documents, highlighted discrepancies, built a timeline so clean it could have passed an audit. I made 3 phone calls, one to Martha's best friend. I asked her to be at the hospital Friday morning. She didn't ask why. One to an old colleague who knew how to stand firm without speaking, and one to hospital security. Calm, professional. I told them there might be tension. They understood. Thursday night, Melissa pressed harder. The buyer wouldn't wait. Time was running out. "I understand," I told her, and I meant it. Friday morning, I dressed with intention. Pressed shirt, dark jacket, no softness left to mistake for weakness. When I walked into Aaron's room, they could tell something was different. "Have you decided?" Melissa asked. "Yes," I said calmly, placing a black folder on the rolling tray. "But first, there's something you need to see." She frowned. "What is that?" "The truth," I replied. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply reached for the tablet and pressed play. The room seemed to shrink once the screen lit up. No one spoke. The tablet rested between us like a neutral witness, the kind that doesn't care who gets hurt as long as the facts are correct. The timestamp glowed in the corner, 1:42 a.m. Melissa leaned forward first. I heard her breath catch before she realized she'd made a sound. We watched the door close. The bed still. Then Aaron's eyes opened. Not confused. Not medicated. Awake. He sat up, both legs over the side, both feet on the floor. He stood without effort, balance easy, posture relaxed. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't look away. On the screen, he reached under the pillow and pulled out his phone. Smiled. At 1:47, the door opened again. Melissa appeared on the video. She froze beside me now, color draining from her face as she watched herself walk into the room, carrying the paper bag. The laugh that followed sounded obscene in the silence of the real room. She handed him the food. He ate with appetite, careless and whole. At 1:52, he stretched. I heard the monitor in the real room beep steadily, indifferent to the collapse happening beside it. When the video ended, no one moved. Aaron's mouth opened, then closed. His hands shook as he pushed himself higher on the bed, forgetting for a moment who he was supposed to be. "Dad," he said finally. "Please. I can explain." I opened the black folder and laid 2 MRI reports side by side. "One of these is real," I said quietly. "One of these is not." Melissa's hands began to tremble. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "From places you assumed no one would check." The door opened. Dr. Leonard Klein stepped in, clipboard in hand. He stopped short when he saw the tablet and the document spread out. "Perfect timing," I said. Daniel entered behind him and placed a bank transfer receipt on the tray. $15,000, he said calmly. 10 days before the accident. Dr. Klein's face went pale. There was no spinal damage on the original scan, a voice said from the doorway. Nurse Allison stepped inside. Her posture was straight, her tone steady. I reviewed the initial imaging myself. Aaron broke then. Not a performance. Real sobs. "I owed money," he cried. I didn't know what else to do. I looked at him the way I used to when he was a boy, when a scraped knee was bad enough to stop the world. "You had choices," I said. "You chose deception." He reached for my hand. I stepped back. Security appeared in the doorway, calm and professional. "I love you," I said quietly, "but I won't protect the man you became." I turned and walked out. In the hallway, Martha's friend squeezed my arm. My colleague stood beside me without speaking. As the door closed behind us, something loosened in my chest. Not victory, freedom. Because sometimes the loudest moment in a person's life is when they finally stop explaining themselves. And I knew, walking away, that nothing would ever be the same again. The weeks after felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just still. Like the house after a storm when the wind has passed, but the air hasn't quite settled yet. I didn't follow every legal development. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require your constant attention once they've been spoken aloud. The house remained mine. The account stayed frozen until the dust cleared. I was advised, carefully and repeatedly, to consider my own well-being. Funny how concern shows up once you stop being useful. I spent more time at home. Real time. Mornings with the kettle. Black coffee, no sugar. Martha used to tease me about that, said bitterness didn't need encouragement. I still talked to her while the water boiled. Old habits don't disappear just because someone does. The hallway clock kept breathing time forward, 1 second at a time. Aaron didn't call. Melissa tried once, left a message full of apologies and explanations that never quite touched the truth. I didn't return it. Silence, I'd learned, isn't cruelty. It's a boundary. My grandson, Noah, came by on Saturdays. We walked slowly to the park, fed the birds, said very little. He carried questions in his eyes, but he didn't push them out yet. Children sense when answers are heavy. One afternoon, as we sat on a bench, he looked up at me. "Grandpa," he asked, "do you still love Dad?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted the truth to come out clean. "I love the boy he was," I said. "But loving yourself sometimes means letting go." He nodded, like he understood more than he let on. People talk about forgiveness like it's a requirement for peace. I don't believe that anymore. Peace comes from clarity, from knowing where you end and someone else's choices begin. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I didn't chase revenge. I waited. And when the truth arrived, I stepped aside and let it speak for itself. That's how I sleep now, with a steady heart in a house filled with memories that remain mine. Not every ending needs applause. Some only need honesty. And that is enough. Silence has a way of inviting other noises. A week after I walked out of that hospital room, the call started. Not from Aaron. Not directly. From people who had suddenly remembered I existed. Old friends. Distant relatives. A former neighbor who hadn't spoken to me in years, but just wanted to check in. The questions were always wrapped in concern, but the edges were sharp. "Are you doing okay, Harold? I heard there was confusion at the hospital. Your son's under a lot of stress. You know how accidents can affect families." I listened. I thanked them. I said I was fine. What they didn't say mattered more than what they did. No one asked if I'd been lied to. No one asked what it felt like to discover your own child had rehearsed fear just to move your life around like furniture. Aaron and Melissa were working a different angle. I could see it without being told. The narrative forming quietly. Elderly father, grief-stricken, misunderstood the situation. Confusion is a powerful tool when you don't want facts examined too closely. Daniel warned me. "They're testing the ground," he said, "seeing who believes what." I told him to let them. Because here's the thing people forget about men my age. We've spent our lives watching systems work and fail. We know how pressure moves through structures. We know where the load-bearing walls are. I didn't counterattack. I documented. I requested copies of every medical report, every billing statement, every insurance communication. Not angrily, politely, calmly, like a man who expects paperwork to tell the truth because it usually does. I made one more visit to the hospital, not to see Aaron, but to meet with administration. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply asked questions that required written answers. Why were 2 different MRI reports in circulation? Why was a non-emergency specialist paid before the accident? Why did security footage exist without corresponding nursing notes? Questions, once asked, don't go back into the box. At home, I reorganized. Not just drawers and shelves, my life. I moved Martha's scarf from the coat closet to the bedroom drawer. Folded it carefully. I wasn't preserving the past anymore. I was making space. One evening, Melissa showed up unannounced. I saw her car from the window and didn't open the door right away. Let her stand there. Let her feel the weight of waiting. When I did open it, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just exposed. "We never meant to hurt you," she said. I didn't invite her in. "You meant to use me," I replied. Calm, even. "And you assumed I wouldn't notice." She started to cry then. Real tears this time. But tears, I'd learned, don't erase planning. "I just want my family back," she whispered. I nodded once. So did I. I closed the door gently. That night, I sat in the dark living room listening to the clock. The house felt different now. Not sad. Solid. What Aaron and Melissa still didn't understand was this. I wasn't preparing to punish them. I was preparing to remove myself from their leverage. And once a man does that, everything else starts to shift. They just hadn't felt it yet. There's a moment, when you stop reacting, that people around you grow uneasy. They're used to resistance, tears, bargaining, anger they can redirect or exploit. Silence confuses them. Calm frightens them. It doesn't fit the story they've been rehearsing. Aaron finally called 2 weeks later. His name lit up my phone while I was trimming the hedges out front. I let it ring twice longer than necessary, not out of spite, but because I needed to hear my own breathing first. "Dad," he said. His voice sounded thinner now, less certain. "Can we talk?" "We are talking," I replied. A pause. Then, carefully, "I just want to explain myself." I leaned on the rake and watched a sparrow hop along the fence. "You've had plenty of time to do that." Another pause. Longer this time. "They're investigating the hospital," he said quietly. "Insurance. Licensing." Melissa's scared. "I imagined so. You don't understand how bad things are," he said, frustration leaking through. I could lose everything. I thought of the night he'd stood up from that bed. Strong, confident, smiling. "You risked everything long before I knew," I said. "I'm just no longer absorbing the consequences for you." He exhaled sharply. "So that's it? You're just done being my father?" The question was meant to wound. I didn't let it. "I'm done being lied to," I said. "Those aren't the same thing." He hung up without saying goodbye. After that, the pressure shifted. Letters arrived, carefully worded. Requests for mediation, for reconciliation meetings. One even suggested counseling, together, as if this were a misunderstanding instead of a methodical plan. I declined them all. Instead, I made an appointment of my own. The attorney's office was small, unassuming, a place where conversations stay private. I laid everything out, documents, footage summaries, timelines. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "You're not obligated to protect them," he said, "legally or otherwise." "I know," I replied. "What do you want to do?" I considered the question longer than he probably expected. "I want my life back," I said finally. Quietly. He nodded. "That can be arranged." At home, I boxed up old financial records, not to hide them, but to archive them properly. I transferred ownership of nothing. I promised nothing. I simply positioned myself where no one else could move pieces on my board without my consent. One afternoon, my grandson asked if we could plant something in the backyard. "Something that grows slow," he said. We chose a young maple. Dug the hole together. My knees protested, but I ignored them. Some effort is worth the ache. As we covered the roots with soil, he looked up at me. "Trees take a long time," he said. "Yes," I answered. "But once they're rooted, they're hard to move." That night, as I washed the dirt from my hands, my phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. "We need to talk. This can still be fixed." I didn't reply. Because some things, once exposed to the light, can't be folded back into the dark. And I knew, with a steady certainty, that the most difficult part was still ahead. Not the confrontation, but the consequences. They were just beginning to understand what it meant to lose access to me. Consequences don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, like mail you didn't ask for, but still have to open. Aaron's case moved from rumor to record. Insurance froze payments. The hospital placed Dr. Klein on administrative leave. The altered report became a problem with a paper trail, and paper trails have a way of leading to rooms people would rather avoid. None of that was my doing. I simply stopped absorbing shock for them. What surprised me was how quickly access dried up. Melissa's brother stopped calling. Friends who once dropped by with casseroles disappeared. Invitations vanished. The phone went still in a way that felt different from loneliness. This wasn't abandonment. It was recalibration. People sensed where the weight now rested and chose not to stand beneath it. Aaron called again. Shorter this time. Less theater. They're saying I have to repay the insurer, he said. I don't have that kind of money. I listened. Didn't interrupt. They're asking about the house, he added carefully. They want to know if it was part of the plan. I closed my eyes and pictured the front porch. The way the light softened the steps at dusk. It wasn't, I said. But it became convenient for you. Silence stretched. I could hear him breathing. The real kind. Not the kind he used to sell fear. Can you help me? He asked. I chose my words like I used to choose materials. Only what could hold. I can help you tell the truth, I said. I can't help you escape it. He didn't respond. A week later, a letter arrived from his attorney. Carefully neutral. It proposed a settlement that read like an apology without the word. No demands. Just an acknowledgement that the house would never be mentioned again. I didn't sign anything. I didn't need to. Boundaries don't require countersignatures. At home, life narrowed to what mattered. Morning coffee. The clock. The maple weed planted pushing out a new leaf, tentative but determined. Noah helped me water it, measuring carefully, like too much might drown hope. One evening, as we finished, he asked if his dad was sick. In a way, I said, but sickness isn't always about the body. He nodded. Can people get better? Yes, I said, if they want to. Later that night, Melissa left a voicemail. No tears. No anger. Just exhaustion. We're selling our place, she said. Downsizing. Starting over. I know you won't answer. I wanted you to know. I sat in the dark and listened to the clock breathe. Starting over is a phrase people use when they're tired of carrying the past, but haven't learned how to set it down. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened the window and let the night air in. Somewhere beyond the yard, a dog barked. A car passed. Ordinary sounds. Proof that the world keeps moving when you stop trying to control it. As I turned out the light, my phone buzzed once more. A single message from an unfamiliar number. He's asking questions you didn't expect. Be ready. I set the phone down gently. The quiet had shifted again. And this time, I knew it wasn't done with me yet. Daniel was right. The questions Aaron started asking weren't the kind that come from panic. They came from fear mixed with calculation, which is a dangerous combination when someone realizes the floor they've been standing on isn't as solid as they believed. He wanted meetings. Not apologies, meetings. Neutral locations. Coffee shops halfway between our houses. Lawyers present, then lawyers conveniently absent. He wanted to talk about intent, about how things had gotten out of hand. I declined every request. Not because I was afraid of hearing him speak, but because I finally understood something I should have learned years earlier. Explanations are often just another form of control. If you let someone explain long enough, they'll try to rewrite the damage as confusion, the plan as panic, the lie as love gone wrong. I wasn't interested in revisions. Instead, I focused on what was left to protect. I met with my attorney again. We reviewed everything one last time, not to escalate, but to close doors properly. Asset protections, medical directives, a revised will. Clean, clear, unambiguous. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was removing ambiguity, and ambiguity is where people like Aaron used to thrive. You're sure about this? The attorney asked, tapping the folder. I've never been more certain of anything, I said. At home, the house felt lighter. Not happier, lighter. As if it no longer had to brace itself for arguments that never happened out loud, but still left cracks in the walls. I fixed the loose hinge on the back door. Replaced the flickering porch bulb. Small repairs. The kind that remind you a structure can still be sound if you address the weaknesses early. No one noticed the changes. You smile more, he said one afternoon as we worked in the yard. I worry less, I replied. That's usually how it starts. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, Is Dad mad at you? I wiped my hands on a rag and considered the question carefully. I think he's mad that he can't move things anymore. That seemed to satisfy him. The call came 3 days later. Late evening. Aaron's number. I answered. They're charging Dr. Klein, he said without greeting. And the insurer's referring my case to fraud. I said nothing. I didn't think it would go this far, he added. I thought we'd handle it quietly. We are handling it quietly, I replied. You just don't like the outcome. His breath caught. If I lose everything. You won't, I said. You'll lose illusions. There's a difference. Silence. Dad, he said finally, voice low. Do you even want me in your life anymore? That was the question he'd been circling for weeks, using other words. I want honesty in my life, I said. If you can bring that, we can talk. If not, distance is the only safe thing for both of us. He didn't answer. When the call ended, I sat in the dark listening to the clock. The maple outside rustled softly in the wind, roots settling deeper into the ground we'd given it. I understood then that the confrontation was over, but the reckoning wasn't. Because the hardest consequences aren't legal or financial. They're personal, and Aaron was just beginning to feel them. Time did what it always does when you stop fighting it. It moved forward without asking permission. The investigation concluded quietly. No headlines. No public spectacle. That seemed appropriate. Aaron accepted a plea arrangement that kept certain words out of print but locked others permanently into record. Fraud doesn't need applause to be real. It just needs signatures. Melissa left. Not dramatically. No scenes. She took what was hers, what wasn't disputed, and a version of the future that didn't include rehearsed hospital beds. I heard about it through Daniel, who never added commentary unless it mattered. Aaron didn't call after that. Weeks passed, then months. The house settled into a new rhythm. Morning light through the kitchen window. Coffee steaming. The clock keeping time without judgment. I fixed a fence board that had been loose for years. Repainted the trim on the porch Martha always meant to get to next summer. I wasn't waiting anymore. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Aaron's handwriting. Uneven. Careful, like someone relearning how to speak. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. He didn't even ask for forgiveness. He wrote about shame. About how pretending had become easier than admitting failure. About how he'd confused desperation with entitlement and called it survival. He didn't excuse it. He named it. At the end, he wrote, I don't expect a reply. I just didn't want my silence to be another lie. I folded the letter and placed it in the desk drawer. Not as evidence. As acknowledgement. That evening, Noah helped me water the maple. It had grown taller than I expected. Still thin, but rooted. Grandpa, he said, Dad's moving closer to the city. I heard. Is that good? It's honest, I replied. That's usually a start. Later, as I sat alone on the porch, the air cooling, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't relieved either. I was finished. Finished carrying stories that weren't mine to fix. Finished mistaking responsibility for love. Finished shrinking to keep peace that only flowed one way. The quiet felt earned. And for the first time since that night in the hospital, I slept without replaying the past. Because the truth had already done its work. There's a kind of peace that only shows up after everything noisy has already burned itself out. It's not joy. It's not forgiveness in the way people like to perform it. It's steadiness. The sense that nothing is reaching for you anymore. That no one is pulling at your sleeves or rewriting your words after you've spoken them. That's what my days became. I fell into small routines without thinking about them. Walking the same route each morning. Stopping at the corner where the pavement dips and the maple trees crowd closer together. Nodding to the same woman walking her dog. Exchanging a greeting that never turned into a conversation. We respected each other's quiet. Noah kept coming on weekends. We built a birdhouse together, measuring twice, cutting once. He reminded me of myself at that age, careful, observant, wanting things to fit the way they were supposed to. One afternoon, while sanding the edges, he asked, "Do you think Dad's lonely?" I didn't rush the answer. "Loneliness isn't always about being alone," I said. "Sometimes it's about not being able to hide anymore." He considered that, then nodded, satisfied. Aaron sent another letter a month later. Shorter this time. No explanations. Just updates. Where he was living. What work he'd taken. Ordinary things. He was learning how to exist without shortcuts. And that, more than anything else, told me the lesson had landed. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I understood something important. Relationships don't heal on demand. They heal when both sides stop reaching for leverage. At home, I finally moved Martha's pillow. Not to erase her, but to breathe again. I washed the case, folded it neatly, and placed it in the linen drawer. The bedroom felt less like a shrine and more like a place someone still lived in. That night, I stood in the hallway listening to the clock tick. Same sound as always, but it didn't feel like it was counting something down anymore. It felt like it was keeping watch. I thought back to the hospital room, the blue light, the monitor, my hand wrapped around my son's while he lied without blinking. I understood now that the real injury hadn't been the accident at all. It was the moment he decided I was a resource instead of a person. That wound had closed. Not with apologies. Not with revenge. With distance. And distance, when it's chosen, can be a form of mercy for both sides. I turned off the light and went to bed knowing the story was almost done telling itself. Some mornings, I still wake before the sun. Not because of pain or worry. Just habit. The body remembers what the mind no longer needs to carry. I put the kettle on. Black coffee, no sugar. I stand at the kitchen window and watch the light arrive the way it always has. Slow, patient, honest. The maple in the yard is taller now. Not by much, but enough that you notice if you've been paying attention. Noah helped me measure it last week. He marked the height on the fence post with a pencil, proud like he'd built something himself. "Next year it'll be higher," he said. "Yes," I told him. "That's how real growth works." Aaron hasn't written in a while. That's all right. Silence doesn't scare me anymore. I've learned the difference between absence and peace. One feels hollow. The other feels finished. I don't pretend what happened didn't hurt. It did. There are betrayals that don't fade. They just stop bleeding. But I no longer replay them. I no longer imagine better versions of the past where different choices were made. Those thoughts don't build anything. They just circle. What builds is what you protect after the truth comes out. I protected my home, my dignity, the quiet life Martha and I worked for without ever calling it luxury. I protected the right to be seen as a man, not a safety net or a signature waiting at the bottom of a page. If there's one thing age teaches you, it's this. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes through documents, through doors closing gently, through people realizing they no longer have access to you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't chase punishment. I waited. I stayed still. And when the truth arrived, I stepped aside and let it speak. That's how I live now. With steady hands. With clear boundaries. With a house that holds memories instead of demands. If you're listening to this and carrying something heavy, something you've been told to swallow for the sake of peace, know this. Peace that requires your silence isn't peace at all. Sometimes the bravest thing an old man can do is stop explaining himself. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it meant something to you, I'd be glad to have you along for the next quiet truth. And if you feel like it, leave a comment, just a few words. It's good to know someone's out there listening. That's all I wanted to say.